It appears that it is 8:30. So I will call this meeting to order. I don't see the on-air light yet, so do we proceed without an on-air? Oh, there it came. Thank you. Certification that open meetings have been, Paul? Yes, they are. Paul, thank you. We have a 12-item agenda. Looking for a motion to approve the agenda. Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Minutes from the previous meetings.
Somebody's got their tablet on.
Wait a minute. Oh, okay. Well. Just making sure here. Nope, wrong one. Yep. Yep. Come on back, please. There it came. Okay, the first one is the, that I have in front of me here is the September 5th meeting. Everybody get a chance to look at the handout one? There's a minor change from what was printed, sent out. Adjustment on the discussion of action of items in closed session. There was minor adjustment there. Did everybody get a chance to look at them? If you did, I'm looking for a motion to approve.
Motion to approve the amended.
Second.
Yep. Do I have a second? Oh,
second
sorry,
it,
didn't
yeah.
hear you.
That's okay.
Any other questions? Comments? All in favor of approving the minutes from September 5th, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, now then we have another one online here that's September 5th. Or 19th, I did it again. 19th. That was from the personnel bargaining, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Motion to approve
We did.
the September 5th, or September 19th meeting with personnel bargaining. It's on,
Move to approve.
okay?
Second.
Second, okay. Questions, comments? All in favor, say aye.
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 Carried,
Mr. Chair, I'll abstain from that vote.
okay. Okay. Next item is a public comment period. I will read it. Members of the public will have a 15-minute block of time to comment on today's agenda items. Members may be present in person or call in to make such comments. To comment by telephone, please call 715-538-1894. Public comment may be extended or curtailed at the discretion of the committee and/or board after advisement. Anybody here from the public to just? Seeing none here. Don't see any lights on the phone. We'll leave it open for a few minutes just in case somebody wants to call in and move on. Number 6, 2025 budget update.
Good morning.
Morning.
I am going to share my screen here right away. There we go. So, all right, well, thank you for the time this morning to present the administrator budget to you for 2025. I want to, this is a new process for you, so I appreciate your, understanding, and I want to talk to you just a little bit first about the process here and all of the people that were of help, and really appreciate Paul and all of his years' work, of course, in this role, but also Stacy and Amy and all the help that they put into bringing forward a good budget for you to review, as well as Steve Corbell and Mike Konecki from Government Solutions, who also gave some input, and then Brian Riley from Ellers, who's going to talk to us about debt. I, of course, want to welcome all the department heads and thank them for all of their hard work. This was a long process of a lot of meetings with me, discussions at our regular scheduled meetings, and talking about where we're at, what our hopes are, and where we hope to take things. So they have done a fantastic job with understanding the mission and where we're trying to go, and really being cognizant of keeping a close financial eye on their budgets so that they could offer the best opportunity for their staff in benefits. And that's what one of the things that we wanted to highlight for this budget for 2025. So outline for this meeting, we're going to have this budget process timeline, quickly go through that once again. Our county fund review and department budget overview give you some highlights. Talk about those new position requests that were brought forward the position changes and reclassifications that we did talk about early August, and we're going to talk about what's in the budget and what's not. And then we'll talk about debt and upcoming capital projects if we make that happen. So just to talk about our schedule on page 4. We started in May with having these discussions about our capital outlay and putting new documents together and talking about how we need a 5-year plan, a longer outlook. A lot of meetings, June, August, meeting with all of the staff and reviewing all of the projects that came in and talking about and having people look forward a little bit more. And then, of course, in September, having everyone, or in August, everyone putting in their budget priorities, and September, them sitting down with me and going through line by line and talking about these things again. My work with them is being impressed at how their interest really is being able to bring forward a pay increase for our employees and keep them at the top. In October now, this is the first presentation of this. We'll present it again next week at our budget workshop. It's basically going to be the same presentation, just for the entire board. And then at the 16th, it'll be brought forward to for any further discussion. And then Paul's going to publish it and get it out so that we have public notice for that. And then November 12th is when you're going to vote on that. So just as a review of the county and our funds that we have, I just want you to get an overview of this and looking at this, and to look at the different kinds of funds that are part of Trempealeau finances, and to think of us as a broader picture in talking about our enterprise funds as well. And the enterprise funds are more business-related funds, but they are a part of Trempealeau County, and you oversee those budgets as well. We've got the County Highway Bridge Fund, Healthcare Center, and Highway Department there. Looking at page 8, talking about the breakdown of where we spend our money as levied by department. And I think if you look at page 9, you can get a better view of just looking at the pie chart and how that's broken down, where we spend and focus our funding on. So to give you some highlights on this budget, the 2025 budget proposal fulfills the mission of the Justice Center project by completing the courthouse renovation, making that a priority. Maintaining road infrastructure by investing in road maintenance and construction. Our general fund and human services, health department services, departments returned in 2023 a total of about $800,000. We'll use 50% of that to balance the 2025 budget. This does get a little bit more difficult as we start to think about 26, when we really tighten things up, as we did in 2024, is a big question mark about what we'll have for 2026. And so we do have to kind of think about that as we plan in our budget for 2025, of course. We are investing in the human element of the county by addressing a lack of pay increase in 2024 for county employees. The budget was created from the aspect of sustainability, so over the next year I'll be evaluating positions to determine what's necessary staffing. I currently am already doing that, and you're aware of some of that already, where I've been looking at, again, like the land management director position that is eliminated in this budget. The horticulture position from UW Extension that is eliminated in this budget, so I have been looking at that. As another highlight in this budget, libraries are funded at 100%. I will say this is a philosophical type of question that you have, and whether you don't mandate it, you're required to support it at 70%, but it's up to you on what level to go at. I do believe that libraries are an integral part of our communities, especially in rural America, where they are a cultural hub, where they are a community hub. And so I think the stresses that we feel here, and if you've been on the board in dealing with these budgets, you know how difficult these budgets are. That's what communities are experiencing, and tenfold. And so I guess as a priority in counties, helping to support county or the libraries throughout the county is a positive to me. It's something to always consider in the future. Again, it's not a mandated at 100%. So in this budget, though, they are funded at 100%. So if you look at our tax levy for 2025, the proposed tax levy, $17,441,231. And just to point out, in 2024, our tax levy was $17,669,885. So we're looking at a reduced levy of $228,653. Sounds good. Maybe we should spend it. Not so quick. We're not going to do that. We're just going to have a savings in 2025 of a lower reduced levy. So if you look at the mill rate would drop from $5.60 to $5.12 per thousand evaluation. Of course, that impacts the tax rate people would experience on homeowners, and it's varied, of course, right? Just depending on how their assessment on their homes changes. So, but generally, people should see a decrease. If we're talking about where did some of these, what came into the considerations for this budget, we did receive an increase in shared revenue of $101,312. It's about a 3.7% increase. Budget includes transportation aids increase of about $73,000. We do have investments that have been very successful this year because of higher interest rates, plus some of the extra ARPA funding that we have involved in that. And so a conservative estimate at this point is about $375,000 for the year. I'll talk about that a little bit later in thinking about the use of those funds. I'm proposing in this budget a no step increase, but to have a COLA that includes 3% for 2024 and a 3% for 2025. And I'd like to just share with you some information that I have that is data from around the state that definitely would speak to why this is a good thing and why it's all within what we're seeing. So last year in 2024, this is data from 2024, on an average, you would have seen anywhere from about 3 to 5%. There's some outliers at 2% and some, one outlier at 6%, but overall, we're seeing a 2 to 5% increase. So my proposal then is a 3% for 2024, and then again, a 3% for the 2025, which we're gonna put all into this, of course. I guess the biggest thing is to think about, again, in 2025's budget, in thinking about that, initial conversations I'm having with counties are at least a 3% and higher for many counties. So I think it's definitely something that's attainable.
Are you gonna,
Yep.
I got a question.
Yep, sure.
Well, then if you're gonna give them a 3% for this year. for
It'll
2020.
be in 25.
But are you gonna backdate it and give them all for the whole year, or how are you gonna do
No,
this?
it's just all included in the
It's
going
actually
forward.
6%.
It
for
is,
20
yeah.
Because if you give them a 3% for 2024, then are you gonna take away those 2 days
Nope.
of vacation? Because that was given in lieu of COLA, so you're contradicting what the 2 days off was for. It was to help the employees offset they didn't get a raise. So which way you're gonna go? Are you giving them both?
Well, so that was only for 1 year. It'll have to come back to the board to determine whether they want to include the 2 days off for the future.
That wasn't just for 1 year.
Yes, it was, yep.
I don't remember if it was.
Yeah, it was 1 year. I think
Yeah.
Chair
1 year trial.
Larson
Yes?
could speak to
Okay,
that.
well then that explains it, okay? Thank you.
Yep. So, but good questions. And if anybody does have any other questions, feel free to stop me. Don't, I'm just going through this, but just feel free to interject. That's fine. So then moving on though, this budget does include a 7.2% increase for health insurance. I'm going to pass around, Amy's going to pass around also data that shows where we are as compared to other counties throughout the state. We're comparable. And so I think it's important that we stay competitive and that we're, again, making sure that we're appealing to individuals that want to come and work here. So that is included in this 2025 budget. The budget includes the new administration department. That includes my position that you had voted on last year, which had not been budgeted for. So that is a new piece to this budget. There's been some movement with people throughout the reorganization of the departments, but I will talk about that and address that a little bit more. But otherwise, really, that's your new position that you had added. And then departmental budget increases are due largely to an increase in contract costs, some supply as well. I think I'll just point out a few for you. Interpreters, we're talking about the circuit court. Interpreters, you've heard about this quite a bit. There's just and it's on the news quite a bit too if you've been listening, and there's just a high demand and not enough interpreters, and so it becomes kind of a supply and demand, of course, right? And they are feeling that they can require more for payment. And then you're also talking about attorneys and how much the attorneys get paid that also work with the circuit court. And the same type of thing, right? Where everyone is experiencing the inflationary costs of wages going up, and so they're passing it along to us. So that's included in our budget. Unfortunately, the state doesn't really allow governments to address this issue of a higher inflationary time. And as we've talked about many times before, population is not, there aren't going to be mass amounts of population change within the country. And so we're going to most likely see this type of impact for a while. But all departments, across departments throughout the county are experiencing increased contracted costs and the supply chain or the supply increases as well. So I'm going to point out with highway, which was a little bit of a change for us in the budget, if you noticed. Highway created a special revenue fund to record appropriate tax levies and transportation aids to finance maintenance and construction costs on county highways. The fund will pay the highway department monthly based on the actual charges for work on county highways. This allows the highway department to operate as a true business-type enterprise fund where all costs of road maintenance and construction are billed to either the state, local governments, the county, special revenue fund, or county departments. This will allow for the calculation of an accurate operating income for highway department operations. And if we look at the Highway Enterprise Fund, DOT regulation talks about how an enterprise for highways should be set up. And their accounting manual recommends tax levy for highway to be placed in a revenue fund, which is what this is, and we're planning. So all funds appropriated for county road maintenance and construction will be placed into the Highway Roads and Bridge Fund. This accounting is more efficient for transparency and then allows for an easy budget to actual comparison to report budgeted funds available for county road work at any time. Sometimes we were seeing a deficit when it wasn't real, it wasn't actual. So we want to be able to see real time where we were at in that budget. And we also want to follow best practices for DOT. I'll take a breather in case anybody has a question. Okay, we're going to move on to the new position requests. Again, I had brought these forward previously, so let's just touch on these real quick. Sheriff Office, Jail Programming Officer, the Maintenance Custodian, Parks Department Maintenance Manager, Zoning Planner, Health Department Public Health Nurse, and District Attorney's Office Office Assistant. So again, no new positions are being recommended unless there's external funding sources available or current employees can help fill the need. This is where you see in the Health Department, the Public Health Nurse is funded in this budget because there's grant funding available for that position. And the District Attorney's Office Office Assistant will be taking a partial time of an individual that's in UW Extension and using that individual for part of the time over in the district attorney's office to help there. I red-starred the Sheriff's Office Jail Programming Officer because I want to point out this position. It's been talked about a lot in the past, and it's a valuable concept, and we do some work with that already, where we have Adam Tronzo from UW Extension who works over in the jail, and he provides services to inmates where he works with them on talking about parenting classes, employment classes, and community reentry services. Valuable, but comes at a cost. And so I think as we look at weighing whether to bring in a position or not, one thing is to look at the funds that are now coming into the sheriff's office through increase in inmates. Although when you bring in more inmates, there's higher costs because of more medical costs and increased costs for food. So I think, again, my recommendation is that this is a position that I really do think that we should be finding grant funding for or outside participation in starting a position like that. I like it. I think it makes sense. But when we're working through our budget this year, and we were looking at where we're taking funds and working from, we need to be concerned about the future of our budgeting and where this happens. This year, we're going to be okay, but I want to be cautious and conservative a little bit about where we are for the future. So let's talk some more about position changes. So I did recommend the elimination of the Director of Land Management position. That's a savings of $100,000. But elevation of 2 individuals to manager that had already happened before I came here, and that was your conservation manager, county conservationist, your zoning and sanitary specialist manager. My recommendation is to elevate the other 2 out of that department as well, that also have managerial responsibilities, where you elevate your Parks and Recreation coordinator to Park and Recreation manager, and then your land records coordinator to land records modernization manager. Again, most people, or both of those individuals, oversee individuals, and it makes for a really smooth transition without a director, that you have people in charge in each of those departments that are in manager roles.
I got a question. Is there a pay increase for these, or is there going to stay at the same rate?
That's coming. I'll talk about that in just a minute with reclassifications. But yes,
Well, then, I mean, if you eliminate one, you just give the money to others.
sure,
have to
that,
look at
when
that.
there's 100, yeah, but there's not even in comparison in what you're still saving, but yes, you're absolutely right. There is a little bit more of a cost to bring in the manager, title, but we're still saving more than we would have by bringing in the director again. And I've had a lot of conversations with those departments and talking about how comfortable do you feel without this position and how are things going and those type, and all of these departments feel like they are pleased with where we're at. So I feel comfortable with that. So in this budget, we are keeping the 2 media positions. We're moving those under the direction of the IT director, but those 2 positions are in the budget. Eliminating the vacant position, that's the UW Extension Horticulture position, there's a savings there. The position that's the other extension position that I had preliminarily recommended we discontinue at the Community Resource Development position, looking to keep that, or it is in the budget at least, looking to keep that and exchange it with a Youth Leadership Development extension agent, thinking on the level of our population decrease and how it is critically important that we are communicating and working with the youth in this county to talk to them about how great it is here and how we want them to stay and build them into leaders so that they can come and work here, but also work throughout the county at existing businesses that you have here and future businesses that you will have. And it's about planting the seed over and over again. So we want someone working with those youth all the time and talking about how great Trempealeau County is and that we need them, we want them to be here, and we want to help them develop and be a partner with them. Even if they leave for a little bit, it's really important, right, that we're planting the seed that someday, when you're ready to start a family, you'll come back here because this is a great place to raise family. Talking about that position with the DA's office, here is where I just noticed this UW Extension Office Coordinator position moves to the half-time with the DA's office. Continued position changes. This is kind of what Mayor was talking about and talking about if I'm going to move the media into the tech IT department, there's a slight step for that, for the IT director to take on a whole new area of focus. Right now, we have our health department director that just left. And so we want to have that conversation about that position becoming not a director, but a manager. And then the health service, human services director and deputy director as elevated a step as well, so that they'll be overseeing the health department. It doesn't save us money, I'll be honest. That's not gonna save us a tremendous amount of money, but it is gonna provide a lot better communications. We hope and we feel in talking with other counties that that's a good move, and we do believe that that would be a positive move for the county. Next, I want to talk to you about emergency management. This was brought forward to me by the sheriff. When the sheriff asked me, hey, do you want to take this position over? The individual is going to be leaving that position, and would you want to take this into the administration department? And I said, no way. What are you talking about? You're crazy. Pretty honest, right? And I said, no, I have never heard of such a thing. And so always, you got to listen and you got to take it back and you got to rethink things and you got to ask questions and you got to research. And that's what I did. And I talked to others about this, and I'll just quick flip to the next page, which talks about who does emergency management work for. And actually, most emergency management employees are under the Office of Administration or Board. So as I started to think about that and talk more with the sheriff about that, I kind of thought, I like this. Met with the former emergency management director as well as the former Dan, and had a lot of conversations. And so this position in the budget is designated as emergency management coordinator grant writer. so that we still have coverage for emergency management, but we're also looking at this individual as taking on grant writing, grant management, applying for federal, state, and local grant opportunities, and helping with economic initiatives. I'm excited about this. I think it's a good opportunity. I think the sheriff is excited about it too, so. All right, reclassifications. This is where, Mayor, you had this question, and let's talk about the reclassifications. Okay, so when we had initial discussions about these reclassifications, we were talking about how are we going to do that? How are we going to look at comparables? So what happened was, we reached out to Carlson Detman, and I think, again, Mayor, you had some good questions about what's the cost of that. That's going to be kind of expensive, and you're absolutely right. It's about $300 to $450 per person for the classification market info. So rather than contract with Carlson Detman, we used internal staff to do accounting with all of our partners around the area and looking at comparable wages. And so this is what is broken down, and that you have the information in front of you in looking at what are minimums and maximums, what were the average wages around these counties in the area. And so basically your first couple of pages focus on the child support area. Move to page 3 in this packet. And you can look at these closer as well. But I want to talk to you about page 3 where it talks about HR manager. This position is currently the HR coordinator and works with me. This is an organizational recommendation for this position. And because I'm looking not as me in this position, but so that you're successful in keeping this position for the future, if you want to keep this as an HR director administrator position combined, I think it's really important that you provide support to this person. And so this person is becoming a manager because I've increased, just like I told you, I've increased some people in my office, and that those people take management. And so this individual just takes some of that stress off of the administrator going forward in managing people. And then you have your HR generalist. That is a position that's also going to be changing in the new year. As we move to a new system of our financial and time management system through the county, we will need someone as an education trainer that's going to, we don't offer education here, quite honestly, and a lot of things that we really need to make sure that we are incorporating into education for our staff. So this individual will be help leading with that. Moving on to the next page.
Let me.
Yes, go ahead. Yeah,
And so HR, we're gonna have an HR person.
we already do. We already do.
We always had.
Yes.
And now you're gonna create 2 positions there
No.
out of 1?
No.
Or explain more.
You're sorry. Yep. These 2 positions already exist.
I know,
Yep.
that one
They're-
is the secretary and one is the HR person.
One is the HR generalist who handles all of the accounting pieces for all of the benefits for all of the staff.
We always had that?
Yeah,
When did you approve that? That wasn't years ago.
yeah.
Okay,
These are,
I'm just trying to
yeah.
get, I'm just,
Yeah, please.
and that's
Good
what their pay,
questions.
their pay is at the bottom. is what they're getting
Correct.
Now.
Correct. The 2025 proposed, yep.
Proposed, so, but they're probably $1 or $2, what's their rate now?
That is listed.
It's got all the counties, but it doesn't have Trempealeau, so I was just wondering, what are we paying these people now?
Current, where it says current.
Yeah, but that's for those counties, I didn't know, that includes Trempealeau, or?
Yes.
I'd like to know exactly what we pay.
Yeah.
So we can see, this is just a you put all the counties together and averaged, I might imagine.
In the proposed, in the average wage up at the top, that is where Trempealeau County is in the average wage for those positions.
Right.
And then in the current, and proposed, correct. So we can absolutely add that information though. Yeah,
Yeah, it'd be nice to know, and what grade they're at.
sure,
'Cause there's quite the discrepancy between the grades.
yes, yep. Yep, we can add a little bit more information on there. Moving on to finance manager, I'll just point out, this is, why I think it's really important that we're evaluating positions and thinking about not what it is that we're doing with those, we're thinking about what we're doing with those positions, but also being innovative and thinking about what could we do with those positions. So the finance manager position is taking that position into, be comparable to other individuals within the county that are in that title, but also looking at what this person did previously in yellow and all of the things in the way that we've built this position over the past only 3-4 months. So again, I think it's really important to think about in all of our departments how we are being efficient and being good stewards of the taxpayer money and what people are doing and what we can get to and evaluating those things. So that's just a piece on that position. The administration specialist at Highway, again, was low in her wages compared to other individuals throughout the county for comparable jobs, and as well as individuals that within what she does there and in the highway department. Next page is project nutritionist. Talked about this. That position is through grant funding through the state. Again, looked at comparables. And Parks and Rec manager. This was a part of the change that I talked about, land management, as well as the next page, modernization coordinator for our in land as well. And that just fulfills the part of talking about having managers in those departments rather than a director. And finally, then corporation counsel. And just quite honestly, again, all of these are reviewed for where they're at compared to other counties, and it's just way too low. So there's no other reason, but you need to be competitive, and got to bring that one up for someone who's really critical to your team here. All right, and then moving on to the last page, this is the whole change that I was talking to you about, information technology director, and that individual taking on the media department as well as your human services director and human service deputy director, how they will also be taking on the role and responsibility of the health department. Reorganization. Questions about these? We'll bring more clarity to that too.
That's an awful lot of reclassifications in one time.
Mm-hmm.
I got one more question. Hang on one sec, if you wouldn't mind.
And so if you look at the timeline, it really was, again, reaching out to department heads and saying, do you feel your staff are appropriately paid? And if not, then we're going to take a look at it and review it. And so if people brought that forward, we reviewed it. And if there was a discrepancy, what's happening, we made a choice to make sure that we were compensating those individuals appropriately.
Rebecca?
Yeah.
Question on the corp counsel position. It looks like your proposed wage doesn't even meet the minimum average wage for Chippewa, Clark, Eau Claire, La Crosse, and Monroe.
Well, we're looking at also where we're at right now. And the piece of wage increases that, right, the 3% that would affect this as well from 24 that will be in 25. And so it actually does bring that up.
Yeah, because I think we should, at minimum, reach the minimum average, so.
And again, but we can review that one too, just to make sure. This was a lot of, I appreciate your thoughts, and if you see anything else that jumps out, please let me know as you go through these, because there is a lot of consideration, and as well as looking at our current step system that we already have in place, and making sure where we fall is appropriate compared to everything else on that step chart. So we'll look at that. I appreciate that. Okay. So some things to also consider when talking about where we made some savings. If you look at page 22, ADRC, again, this I think is just very telling of your department heads in the place that they're at, and thinking about how can they be a partner with the county in looking at how we save funds and how we are being most efficient with what we have and the resources that we had. So this was brought forward by the Human Services Department and ADRC saying, hey, if we move over into just some of the space that's over in the old sheriff's department and some space that's available, we can save $30,000 on our lease for next year, rent and utilities. And then we'll have the remodel happening and we can come right in. So again, I like the thinking on your department heads and thinking about that, and they bring that forward to me. And so I just want you to understand that, and kudos to them and others who are thinking forward and how we can be good stewards to the county. In talking about the treasurer, just want to point out, here's where I talked about this interest income, and we're talking about at least, I had placed before, $375,000, potential to exceed the budgeted amount by $400,000 or more this year. And so my recommendation is to add those funds to the investment funds for the building renovation and full funding of the new HRIS ERP financial system for 2025. We have a good portion of that set aside through the health department ARPA funds. So this would just be another way to finish that off so that we're taken care of in 2025 without impacting our budget and the levy, and getting a new system that I think people are really ready for, which is exciting. We're getting closer. All right, so I'm going to introduce Brian here again, Brian Riley, and we're so thankful to him and the work that he's done for Trempealeau County in the past, and talking about debt and how we handle debt here for the county. I'm bringing forward a plan for the future in looking at bonding. And counties, and Brian has shared as well, and maybe he can talk to this again, counties are facing this as well as every city, town, village across the state. Our funding system is broken through levy limits. It's not working. And so what happens is we are forced to look at bonding more. Well, here's some positives just I'm bringing forward and thinking about why would we want to use bonding. Our long-range planning available to determine financial levels ahead of time. Bonding allows for projects to be completed sooner rather than waiting to see if the money's available. We all know how much highway contracts have gone up in taking care of our roads and the inflationary constraints that we're having there. You're also having citizens that are going to benefit from these projects 10 years from now, 20 years from now, be a part of paying for those projects rather than just the people right now paying for it. So if we took and could pay for all of the roads right now and have them done and have a particular road done, the taxpayer right now is paying for that. And then people in the future are still going to benefit from that. So that's where bonding comes in handy when you can spread it out then, of course. Let's see. So in just finishing up here, you can look at the rest of those bullets. And then finally, upcoming capital projects that were included for 2025. Those are all projects that have been brought forward to you previously in looking at how we might fund these things for 2025 only. I did give you a 5-year plan, but that is just a plan, right? And it's for the board next year to look at and decide and contemplate whether they would take those things forward. But this is the list that's included in 2025. And I think what I wanted to share then is just the breakdown of what those capital improvements are. Again, I like a nice visual. If you look at that pie chart, you can, again, see the breakdown. And you can say proudly, we're investing in our roads in a big way. And that's our priority. And in 2025, you can see we're taking care of that building renovation. And then 2026, whether the board next year agrees to do these things, that's speculation. But I want you to have this as a thought as you're planning and thinking about 2025 includes 26, 27, 28, and 29 include economic development and parks. And if we talk about, or I should say, not parks, but outdoor recreation space, parks, if you look at the popularity of outdoor recreation and Wisconsin is a leader in drawing individuals to this area. And it's one of those things that we've talked about as well as trying to grow our revenues. And our revenues can come from sales tax. So this is an investment in those areas to hopefully grow sales tax for the future and that we're helping our budget for the future. So what other questions do you have? Before I bring Brian in, he's going to talk about this debt concept. Anything else so far? Okay, I'm going to bring in Brian, and he can share his screen. Hi, Brian.
Morning, Brian. Can't hear you.
You're on mute.
Of course I am.
Ah.
Good morning to you all. Right, let me just change the view on my page display. All right, hang in there for a moment. There's. So I'm going to show this in the PDF format just because if I use the PowerPoint, it'll take up all my screens here. So I want to make sure I've got the granular detail in case there are questions. So you'll have to bear with me. Can everybody see what I'm presenting? Look for any kind of confirmation.
Yes.
We're good?
Yes, we can see it.
All right, great. Thank you. And this will dovetail nicely with all the conversations leading up to this. I think we've established and everyone understands that within the context of levy limits, the levy for debt service is not limited under the current framework for levy limits. It's the rest of your budget that is, at least what you levy for. And so understanding all of the things that Rebecca described from a philosophical standpoint in terms of kind of some of the equity aspects of capital improvements and who pays for what, some of the aspects associated with certainty. But I think more importantly, if you're looking at capital investment, it's becoming more and more difficult to fund capital on what I'll call as a pay-as-you-go basis. Paul was kind enough to spend some time with us last week at a levy limit workshop. We've been giving those throughout the state over the course of the last few weeks and ingesting a lot of the kind of angst as to where people are at with respect to 20 years of the levy limit regime and its various iterations. And so, again, more and more capital costs are being funded with capital financing through borrowing. There's a number of ways to look at this on a forecasted basis. We wanted to just arrive at a relatively simple and straightforward solution and limit our look ahead to 5 years. And so we can do any number of things in this regard, but the more we introduce variables, the harder this conversation becomes. The what if in part of it can be endless. So where we landed was $7 million of capital costs that would be financed over a period of 5 years in the years 2025 through 2029. We're very conservative in our estimates of interest cost over that time. And so we just want to bake in a relatively conservative level of understanding. And I would extend that to tax base, the tax base that you levy against. So you've had some nice increases in taxable value, and that's even outside of TIF districts in the underlying jurisdictions. But we're holding all those numbers constant over the forecast period. And so some of these debt issues go out 20 years. And when you go out 5 years and add a 20-year issue, now we're looking at 25 years. So again, in order to have the most conservative estimates, again, we're putting a good spread over current rates, and we're holding your values really constant, both TID in and TID out over the entire forecast period. We can absolutely assume some level of growth over time that would probably be more meaningful in terms of the levy and the tax rate than it would mean for borrowing capacity. So we've built 2 scenarios on a forecasted basis associated with $7 million per year for 5 years. Before we get into those, let's just again refresh everybody on where you presently stand. We've seen this chart before, and it has been updated for values that were published in August, middle of August, and made final this year. The reports associated with being able to identify what the TID out value for the county is have subsequently also been released, and so we've baked that into this analysis. And as you can see here, the blue bars are the dollar amount of debt service that the county levies for. You'll recall that there is some debt that the healthcare center picks up specifically, including a general obligation issue, which was just refinanced for savings this year. This is all cooked into this. And so it assumes that the healthcare center picks up its proportional share of the debt over time. This is only what is levied for. And because of the growth in value, you can see there that the dollar amount of the levy for debt service is relatively flat through 2028. When you take the same number and you divide it into a higher number, you end up with a smaller number. And as a result, the specific tax rate associated with debt only, and frankly, if you held the levy constant, and I think as Rebecca alluded to early in her presentation, the rate is going to go down, especially with respect to debt service. Again, the value has grown and you're dividing the same number into that. And so rather than $1.48 per thousand of value related specifically to debt, you're going to be at about $1.37 per thousand. And again, we're always looking at things on an equalized basis, and I recognize that doesn't necessarily harmonize with the assessed framework that was set out earlier. That's okay. So again, just getting a sense of the structure of what is payable over time and how that equates then to a tax rate associated with the levy for debt service is important. And then ultimately, the last thing I'll point out here is You can see a number of drop downs over time. There's some debt that's paid more rapidly than others. What extends out to 2041 is the Justice Center financing that was done in 2021. And we did do some structuring with that, mostly to the front end, to try to make that largely tax neutral. But the stabilized annual debt service requirement in this framework is about $3 million a year. You can see that's all that's left going from 2032 to 2033. So think of this as a series of constraints and some targets as well, which will make sense as we look at the next set of slides and the two options that we really reviewed. Any questions before I move on? Let me just describe the two scenarios that we've cooked up. One assumes that over the course of the 5-year forecast period, you do issue $7 million. That stays the same in both the scenarios. The difference is what the debt service looks like. Again, we've talked about this before. We don't have to just accept the notion that we'll make level annual payments of principal and interest year in and year out during the life of the debt. In this case, we're assuming all of the debt is 20 years in term. Even if you go back to the list of capital projects, clearly not all of those, each and every cycle, would have asset lives that go out that long. Underlying this structure, we can assume that the short-lived assets are really retired first. So I want to set that aside in terms of any kind of consternation about financing things over longer periods than their useful lives. We can accommodate those things in the context of structuring the debt where it's really not visible to the naked eye. We can build that behind the scenes, make sure that that's being appropriately handled. In this scenario, as you can imagine, the debt service for each issue looks quite the same. When you take in $7 million and amortizing it over 20 years with level payments, there's not going to be a huge distinction from year to year. And in all of those cases, you can see that we're essentially kind of stacking on top of your existing debt service. And the peak comes with the last issue. We'd have an increase from 25 to 26. Again, any capital financing, the debt would be issued in 2025. We talked about the fact that when you adopt your capital budget for the next fiscal year, 25. But you can see here, this is a structure that results in an initial increase in the dollar amount of the levy from 25 to 26 and the tax rate. But then as we go forward, that's going to stabilize as we're taking efforts to structure the new debt around any existing debt. So instead of the $6.5 million, you peak at $5.8 million, and instead of $1.90, you peak at $1.70 per thousand of equalized value. Again, that's going to be a function of what the tax base looks like for the county over at least the nearer term than the prior example. Now, having said that, this is achievable, but it does come with a cost. The cost is a little under $1.5 million of additional interest expense based on our assumptions of interest rates, which are conservative. I could also make the argument that when you're looking at roughly $35 million of capital financing, that the $1.45 million is probably not a huge price to pay, but that's also not my decision to make. That is up to all of you. So again, you've got a scenario where lowest cost would be on a 20-year amortization, just level annual payments. In order to mitigate tax impact, you could take another approach, wrapping around the existing debt. It does mitigate the tax impact, but it does come at the price of some additional interest expense. Again, I'll pause, see if there are questions or comments. All right, let's close things out with a few bits and pieces of fiscal matters. The question was brought up at one point. We're dealing with big numbers here, and it's hard to get the right gradation in a chart, just given that there's two extremes, relatively small and relatively big. In this case, looking at things through the lens of what happens to your borrowing capacity over time if you issue $7 million a year, 4 or 5 years. And the answer is it's really kind of nominal in the grand scheme of things. And what you're looking at here is the blue line represents your current GO borrowing capacity on a dollar basis. So 5% of your total equalized value results in a borrowing limit of a little under $180 million. As it stands right now, you have about $110 million of that available to you, or about 2/3 of your available borrowing capacity. If you said, we want to do this, let's move forward, and do the 5-year plan. Obviously, you can't do that as a board, but if subsequent boards also follow that strategy, ultimately what happens is you're paying down debt as you're issuing new debt. And so the red bars represent the total amount of principal outstanding, which again, the forecast period ends in 29, so it shouldn't be a surprise that you peak in 29 and then fall off after that, after debt is retired. You will likely issue additional debt in the future. Again, we're trying to just focus on a near-term strategy. The green line is new debt issued, quite obviously $7 million each year for 5 years. The purple bar is how much you're paying down year in and year out. As it stands right now, you're paying off $4 to $5 million a year over the next roughly 5 years. All right. And so I'd say all in, this amount of debt in the context of how much you're paying off, which includes the estimated payment structures for the 5 additional issues over the 5 years, you're still probably in fine shape. You're staying above 50% of your total borrowing capacity. There are other metrics that can and should be looked at over time that play into the rating. And those have to do with debt as a dollar amount of debt as a percentage of your total equalized value, things like debt per capita, how much of your debt you're retiring within a 10-year window. And I'd say by those metrics, you're probably still fine, although maybe a little higher on things like the debt per capita side, just because of the population of the county. You can't really control for that. This one in and of itself, I just wanted to answer the question. I don't have real concerns personally over what the profile looks like over time. I think that can be managed. There are other ways to potentially work around these sorts of situations as well and still execute on the same strategy. I think more importantly are a number of comments associated with debt service payments funded from the levy as a percentage of your total budget. This was a refrain we heard last time from the rating agency, Standard & Poor's, or I guess now S&P Global. They don't refer to themselves like that anymore. But we were creeping up against some of their key thresholds, but some of this has some unknowns to it in terms of what your total budgeted general fund expenditures look like. And if we include debt service in that, obviously then your percentage of that total. And so it kind of depends on what that looks like over time as well. And then also keep in the back of your mind what those two different scenarios look like, the level payments and the wraparound solution. And again, taking into consideration what the cost is of achieving the wraparound solution. Your rating is a big component of your cost of capital. And so you need to balance that in terms of the other metrics that we talked about. Again, longer term to final maturity, that's going to be a higher interest cost, but lower annual payments. We identified that and what the cost is associated with the wraparound solution. And then all of you need to come to the table with your thoughts and opinions around what is the benefit on a cost basis as well for mitigating the tax impact and what that means to the budget over time. The rating implications are their own thing. You don't have control over that. And my message to most clients is you need to manage the county in what your opinion is the best outcome and what kind of capital investments you require. The rating is important, but to manage the county to a rating requirement, then you're losing some level of control and you're not best able to express your own opinions on what's needed. And so I'm not arguing for you to issue more debt. I'm just saying in the grand scheme of things, you should be thinking about it. Your primary consideration should be what you all think is best for the county on a long-term basis. So again, the absolute dollar amount, the principal outstanding is probably not a super relevant credit metric, but you do need to be mindful of how much of the total budget is dedicated to debt service. The kind of the line in the sand, so to speak, from a rating perspective is about 25%. And so if you get above that, that becomes a negative factor in the mosaic of your rating. That's not the only factor taken into consideration. And it sounds a little strange, but debt in and of itself as a category of the rating is really not the predominant factor that the rating agencies look at, but it is an important one and it does play into the totality of the rating. And you have some other characteristics that you do need to mitigate from a rating perspective. And you've largely done that through maintaining a strong fund balance, but these other things at the margin do matter. And so as you move forward in time, this needs to be continuously reviewed, primarily because when the Justice Center project came to light and that became reality, the financing associated with that probably pushed you a little over, I'd say 20% of your total budget dedicated to debt service. Big picture, all the things that were stated about levy limits are relatively accurate, and this is one of them. More and more taxing jurisdictions have shifted capital costs to debt service. The only reason why that matters is that's a fixed cost, and you don't have decision-making authority over whether or not you levy for your debt service. Really, I guess you could use cash to supplement the levy and buy it down. Not a good practice in general because you do not have unlimited cash. And you will run out of it at some point if you want to keep doing that. And so ultimately, again, the lens of this needs to look at what is best for all of you as decision makers at the county, but also within the mosaic of the rating aspect. And clearly, one of those solutions that we built would be better in this regard than the other. The wraparound solution peaks at a lower level. Again, it doesn't mean you're never going to issue debt again. Your budget will change over time and likely grow. To what degree can't be known right now. But it does come at a cost of higher interest expense, right? One thing not baked into this is the potential for a new highway shop. And I think the estimated cost of that as of right now is $4 million. I think that has really no consideration in the context of the total amount of debt, given the numbers we're talking about in terms of absolute dollar amounts. But again, that does come with additional debt service and needs to be contemplated appropriately. I want you all to feel confident that while these are two solutions that we're looking at from a forecasted basis, there are other means to achieve similar outcomes, but in many cases, there's no free lunch. And as we're moving through the course of time, if some of those need to be discussed, that's our role, is to help bring those thoughts and ideas to the table to mitigate any potential negative outcomes. Things like interim financing, combining, reimbursing by using cash in one period and combining really multiple years of capital costs into a single issue in a subsequent year. We can play around with all of these things within a spectrum as you move forward in time to best accommodate what we feel will be mitigating any potential negative impacts, not just from the levy perspective, your fiscal profile, but also in the context of the rating. So that's the last slide in the handout there. And again, I'm happy to answer questions and engage in any other additional discussion on the topic.
Thank you, Brian. I wondered if, when we talk about this again next week, if you could include the slide that you had put together already the last time that talks about the taxpayer impact, so we see that one once again.
Yeah, sure thing. In that context, I think we would try to target the peak.
Yeah.
Versus just the year over year. Last time we talked about it, we were looking at a single isolated debt issue. And so we can look at it a number of ways, and we can do it year over year and start there, but then also show the peak aspect. I was a little uncertain as to how we might want to do that, and didn't want to confuse the issue in terms of what it is we really need to focus on. I think at the exec finance and the board level, these are all important aspects. And then if we want to also communicate what that looks like in terms of tax impact, we can do that as well.
Yeah, I like that, and having both looks at that, that'd be great.
A comment, Brian, not maybe directly to you, but for who's sitting here today in public that's might be on. I believe we're number 4 in the state in debt per value. This just put us to number 1. I don't know if that's anything to brag about. And obviously 35 more million borrowed with a 40 million that we owe already makes me awful nervous. And we've asked for the cost to the taxpayer, which is obviously going to be, just running a few numbers here, $100 to $200 a year on a $200,000 home, so that the taxpayers realize that ahead of time. That's my comment. Thank you.
I think when Brian shared that again, that was just looking at the initial year. But if I'm thinking about those, the tax impact at
Yeah.
that time over the spread out or with the wrap was about a $10 or $25 a year, depending on the valuation. I can't remember, but I don't have that in front of me.
This is the sheet you're referring to. But yes, this did assume just a single issue, and then going from 25 to 26 in terms of tax impact.
We're not seeing that. If you can share your screen.
Oh, yep, I forgot to hit the last button. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Thank you.
So this was the page that you're referring to and can be updated to make the distinction between the two scenarios. I think for the 25 to 26 scenario, this is more representative of the year over year increase, and then that stabilizes with this sort of solution over a longer period of time.
So you're not hitting the $100 or $200 unless you have a valuation of $1 million or $2 million.
I'd want to make sure I think the answer is yes, but I don't want to just speak out of hand here since we're just pulling this up now. So
That would be just for the first year, correct? But we keep adding 7 million on top of that.
yeah, if we look at this one,
We get to that
this
2029.
this is the similar. So if we use if we use this as an analog to what was described at the last presentation, if we go with the structure that takes into consideration your existing debt and tries to kind of filter in new debt service, we would peak around here, which is 25 to 26, right? And then you'd be generally flat. This is all in the future, so I can't know with certainty, but just for your edification and understanding what this all looks like, once you take the initial impact in this scenario, it stays relatively flat over time. And I think part of that, from our perspective, what we typically do, if this is your long-term strategy, we look at what the value that you're taxing against year over year is, and then we try to match a number in the next year that will kind of fill that bucket, so to speak. If we think about all these as their individual buckets, for this year, this number isn't static. It is what we need it to be from a tax rate perspective, and we'll fill that bucket up to this level, essentially. So the goal would be for it to look like this on a long-term basis so that what's happening here, you're not seeing additional increases. Now, whether or not you borrow $7 million a year in and year out can't be known with certainty. So just know that these are all estimates and based on forecast.
So basically, it would be fair, it would be stable across in that scenario.
That would be the goal.
Yeah,
You take one kick at the can in terms of the impact, and then you try to keep it stable over time.
If you could just show us, like, again, on Monday, a 5-year outlook on
Yes.
that, I think that would be helpful. Thank you, Brian.
Yep, I can maybe craft it a little differently too. So it's, we need to reduce it all to one page. So I just want to contemplate how to do that succinctly.
Yep.
I'm back on again. Just my question is, and I guess you're going to show us that when we get to that 26, when it goes to $1.70, that's quite a difference than that beginning. I think was that
This did not-
$1.48.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So when
that's going to be a different number.
it will be when we built this, the TID out value for the county was not available. And so that was held constant. And so between then and now, that number did become available, and it's higher than what your TID out value was in the prior period. So I don't disagree. The tax rate impact will be more pronounced in this particular circumstance, primarily because this assumed year over year, 24 going into 25, the tax rate for debt service would have been about the same. Instead, you're going to drop down a little bit. So you are correct in that regard, which is why I also want to rebuild this in a more succinct way that takes into consideration all the things we're talking about today.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other things that you would like to see for Monday? I appreciate your thoughts, and if there's anything more to bring forward that we could build, and some of the other comments that were already shared, we'll build forward for Monday.
For Brian, this is Dave. Does this scenario address the issue of approximately $2 million of this is for shorter term assets than a highway? One of my concerns would be to make sure that those shorter term assets are paid for in the early years. Does this address that issue?
We don't start there, but I want to assure you, think about it this way. When we look at, I'm just going to share again. I'm sorry, I keep turning it on and off, but I think it's helpful just to have a visual in this context. So, all right, think about it this way. Big picture, we have this wraparound solution, right? Now think about it in the context of an individual debt issue. It's very common for us. We need $2 million. 200,000 of that is for equipment, right? $500,000 is for building improvements. $1.3 million is for streets and whatever. When we build it internally, we build the same wraparound solution so that let's say if it's level debt service, in total, the whole thing's level top to bottom, but underlying that in the first 3 years, we've fully amortized the equipment. In the first 10 years, we've fully amortized the building improvements. And over 20 years, we're paying off the streets. The longer ones are wrapped around the shorter ones, if that makes sense. And then you arrive at a total level solution, just like this looks like here. So think about this piece here being like a single debt issue. Here's a purpose, right? We've got three. So in theory, yes, we are doing all of that on your behalf behind the scenes.
Thank you.
We do have the long and short budget printed so that you can take that with you as well. That was electronically sent, but we thought maybe you might want to have that for bedtime reading. You can take it and fall asleep to it at night.
And obviously, we should bring this back again on the 14th, yeah.
Sure. Otherwise, I think that's what I have to share for that piece. Yep.
Anybody else have any other questions on the budget? Okay, wait a minute. Adi first.
I'm sorry. Well, do we need all these changes in 1 year? That's a lot of moving around for administration moves, and, you also have an increase here for a new administration department. Well, we kind of hired you to do all that, not to have you hire you and then hire somebody else that worked for you. I mean, we were hoping that you could, that's a lot of burden on the taxpayers. I mean, to add these all, and once we look at this, I maybe might explain it more, but that's just a statement. I'm gonna take a look at this again, because, I think some are probably warranted, yes. And we do want to keep our employees, because we've got great employees. And,
Mr. Chair.
Just a minute. Jeannie?
My question is simple. Rebecca, will we get all of that bedtime information being sent to us prior to next Monday?
Yes.
Thanks.
Okay. Bridget?
I do know when the committee that looked into hiring our administrator, one of the things that they wanted us to keep in mind was that as we got an administrator on board, that there could be some other needs that were not filled just by that position. But at that time, the board decided that they weren't going to pursue, say, like a finance manager. They did recommend things like that, but felt that it would be a better fit for the administrator to determine what those needs were.
I do remember that conversation at the time of hiring. Howdy?
We also said we wanted to hire administrators so they could write grants, and it would save us the money of finding a grant writer, and we got a grant writer in this also. So, you know,
Correct.
that's what I'm saying. We said things at the start, and now we're going back on it. It's all cost money, so just something to put out there for information.
Yep.
Well, just specifically to that position, that is already funded at 100% emergency director position. So you're already paying that. This position is going to be changed to emergency management coordinator and grant writing. So that'll be, you know, I've done some of that myself, obviously, but to have the appropriate amount of time and so that it's just reconfiguring how you look at certain positions. That is that position in particular. We can go into more of the position changes, but I think a part of having an administrator is looking at organizational change, absolutely. And so whether you're comfortable with that or not, that is why I left in the media. I left in the UW Extension because of discomfort. But I'll tell you, your budget is not flaming with, opportunity. You need to be cognizant of how we save costs and how we move forward efficiently in looking at positions. So I think that, but we can address that more at the meeting on Monday and trying to break that down a little bit more.
And I do understand the budget part of it, and I know the change is never easy. It's always tough. But, and the key is to do it correctly and where it's needed. And that's what the questions will be about. Not to sit there and say, well, we don't want to change, we don't want to do nothing. You said, no. But there is a little validity to the fact that, well, you come in with all these changes, and we come in at this side and say, well, we got to try to keep the taxes here. And so we got to kind of figure out together the best avenues to travel here.
Yeah, and I hope that you can see with building this, where, we have brought down the levy, a couple $100,000, and the mill rate, and so very, very much keeping that in mind. So I do agree in making sure that we're still competitive in how we, again, the priorities of supporting staff and being competitive in some of the areas that we've, at least I think are important. That's for you to decide. You're absolutely right. And I don't disvalue at all your position and what you have to think about and consider. So it is up to you. And if you have more questions, please feel free to reach out. And I'm happy to discuss things and rethink things and kind of, if you have other thoughts on this. I think all of these things are through a lot of discussions and a lot of planning and a lot of vision for where I do think it's a value for the county. But certainly, I take a lot of my work through building what other people contemplate and think about as well, and I have to take into consideration. So please, always feel free to, I have an open door, and I'd be happy to talk about some other things or different ways to do things. That'd be great.
I think the important thing to remember is, even with all these changes, the mill rate is coming down, and that's the most important thing.
Yep. Okay. I'm not quite sure of this item here. The next one says discussion possible action on debt service. No. That was his presentation, right? I mean, it was kind of, I was assuming it was all together in one. That kind of got a little convoluted, so. Anything else on this item? Okay, we'll move on to sales tax update.
The sales tax that we received now is $221,744.95, bringing us to $1,571,032.22, which is still a little bit higher than last year. I think it's about $7,000 only, so it's probably staying kind of in line.
Okay. Now then, since we're talking sales tax, does that, quote, extra sales tax from that new law. Has that shown up anyplace yet? Nothing's shown up
We
yet.
haven't seen it yet, no.
Okay.
John asked me
I
about
don't
that
even
every
hear it
month.
mentioned anymore. I thought it was supposed to start as of July
That's
1st.
that's what we understood, yes.
It's supposed to be another 0.5%, which would basically double
Well,
our sales tax.
depends on, like I said, have stated before, my research has come up that this will net us anywhere from $40,000 to $2.5 million, depending on who you listen to.
Must be the
That's a big
government.
change.
That's a lot of change, yes. Okay, general fund update.
That one, the only change is the action that you did at September County Board of the Deputy County Treasurer, 13,517.26. That brings us to an adjusted balance of 3,039,394.68.
Okay. Any questions on those?
The other thing is, keep in mind that we're using 400,000 of that to balance the budget also
For next year.
for 26. Yeah.
Okay, well. Any questions? None? Department reports and requests. I see Ann moved into position, so Ann is up with land record.
Hello, I'm not used to such a big audience. If you guys want to go back to work, that's fine with me. Did everyone get a report, either digital or hard
Yes.
copy, or both? It's the same report as I do every time, just updated numbers. I do want to highlight some of the layers that we maintain. Some that we've added just recently was a solar farm layer and then zoning density tracking layer. So those are new ones. And then I always like to flip to the amount of people, or users, I should say, that go on our GIS website and our tax and assessment website. That's on page 3. So we've had it for a full year now, and we've had a lot of use. It looks like so far January or February is the most used month that people are using the website on a Tuesday. So, see, I'm clearing the crowd. And then on page 5, it does show the total visits from users out there, how much time that saves our staff in the GIS department. And it also shows how much time and money it's saving for users who are usually coming in. And then it shows its total savings amount of over $2 million. On page 6, I just wanted to point out that our county surveyor has reviewed 67 CSMs, which brings us to $11,725, which is over what we projected for 2024 already, so. And then on the very last page, there's a few things I want to point out. We had our Trempealeau County Land Information Council meeting September 11th to go over our upcoming land information plan that's due to the state. The draft is due by October 31st, and we make sure that all other land information departments' needs are met when we create that plan. And then next week, we're all going to be in La Crosse for our fall conference. Next week, we'll also be at the Quarterly Towns Association meeting, talking about our new tax and assessment software and making sure that the townships are aware of the Daniels Law, which is right up above, Act 238, the Judicial Officer Privacy Act. And then Susan and I were just gonna give a little bit of an update on the surveyor's contract RFP. I was in the Schwamigan Forest until about 8 o'clock last night. So I was gone all last week, so I just crawled out of the woods and just getting used to reading my emails again, indoor plumbing, things like that. So while I was gone, Susan and our current surveyor were going back and forth with what needed to be added to this RFP, but we do need to get this done within the next 3 weeks.
3 to 4, sorry, my voice is going a little bit. We do have to set up a schedule for that, and that's really probably more appropriate to discuss in closed session, but we'll go through, at some point, we may approach you and ask for a special session if need be. We probably need to just circle back together between Ann and I to gauge where we're at with making sure that you have a near final draft to review before then. But if you have any questions, please let us know.
And does anyone have questions for me?
Any questions, Fran?
Can I make one comment?
Comment, yep.
I caught this in the budget now that, in the reclasses, that Ann is a standalone department. She's not part of land management. I wanted that to be clear. So she should really be the director of that department rather than a manager in the budget. Because it's not part of land management. Just my comment.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, thank you. Paul? Clerk update.
Mine's much shorter than Ann's. Oh, not height. Tomorrow marks 4 weeks till the election, so we're only a month away from the election in November. And we're working diligently to get everything ready for that. Our second batch of ballots has not been delivered yet. They're supposed to be here this week, which we will get out as soon as they're here, because Dawn has now accepted a position with the City of Independence for higher pay and better benefits. And so I don't blame her for that. So I'm working on
Way to go,
getting
Audie.
a replacement in there as soon as possible. That's about it. The rest of the office is working well.
We'll miss you, Dawn.
Yes.
Yes, I will miss everybody. I have enjoyed sitting in meetings with you guys, listening to what everybody has to say, and getting to know each and every one of you, kind of on a personal level. So I just want to thank you guys for the opportunity of giving me more knowledge to take with me.
Best of luck in everything you do.
Thank you.
Good luck, Don, because I know that guy over there, he ain't very good.
Yeah, I don't know about him.
Just one question, Paul. Has there been a lot of questions, information requests in regard to the elections and polling places? Has that been an issue, I'll call it, or?
I guess I can throw one more thing in. October 25th, we'll be having an election training.
Okay.
That'll have all the updated rules and regulations that.
Do all the townships come in?
What?
Do all the townships and
Yep,
cities all?
they, I think we've only got one municipality that hasn't responded. So we are working on that, but no, all 26, we're hoping will be represented at that meeting. It's in Town of Preston Hall on the 25th of October. And there'll be a session 9 to 12 and another session 1 to 4.
Okay.
Paul, just a question, will you be attending the clerks' roundtable that they're having in the county?
We both will be.
Okay, good.
You gonna bring Mary with you?
I think I talked to her about it. I didn't get an answer from her. I'll find out. She's been coming in on Fridays, so I'm giving her quick lessons on everything in the office, so she should be up to speed when she gets elected, and she should be elected. I'm not campaigning. She's the only one on the ballot, so everything's going good that way.
Next item on the agenda is confirm the date and time for the next meeting, and it says November 4th, 24 at 8:30. Any issues with that time? That will be our next meeting then from, unless, wait a minute, no, we got something else just for, no, that's full county board, everything coming up, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
we'll be back and I'll send you an email with Ann once we have a little bit more details firmed up.
Okay.
A little bit more firmed up, I should say.
Everybody knows about tonight's meeting also, that you call in?
I don't think we're going to be able to have that.
Oh, it's,
We're going to have to reschedule it, so we're gonna have to look at a different time, so.
we had all but one county board member notified of it anyway, but we'll have to get a hold of and cancel it then.
That was at 7 tonight, that one you're talking
It was
about?
at 7.
Canceled? Okay.
It was a virtual meeting with everybody. Everybody got it, right?
So,
So we better get a hold of everybody and cancel it? Okay. It's canceled, yep. Yeah, you should see it on there and have a packet on it.
with a, when you say a reschedule, a near future or?
Yeah, within the next day or two.
Okay.
Yeah. So we just gotta talk with everybody to make sure we have appropriate times that work for everybody.
I'm gonna make one more comment, if I may.
Go ahead.
That's it.
We've got to work on that wall there, because you can't see, Dave, just a black shape,
That was planned that way.
huh? So, I don't know. We'll have to talk to Jeremy on that, because there was another meeting that was in here.
I've
And it
seen-
was
I've seen-
worse when that sun was
Yep.
right behind you.
Any day meeting, it's that way, but.
So I think, I don't know, curtains?
What happens if you turn this around?
Then the audience will be all coming past us when you go.
See them when they're standing there, because it'll be the same thing as Dave.
Right.
They have something to do with the lighting.
It's something that has to be addressed anyway.
Yeah, okay. Okay, anything else? Next meeting, November 4th at 8:30. Meeting is adjourned.